Welcome to our second half.
I know things are rough, but I just...
She's my cheerleading group right here. Bricka-backa-backa. We're going to introduce the special guest in a moment. Before we do, we're going to show a quick trailer of a documentary that our guest is working on. I was very fortunate that my friend Mike introduced me to this gentleman. We hit it off immediately because we love Laurel and Hardy. And unlike myself, I can't say that I talked to Stan Laurel, but he did. And he called him Uncle Stan. So pretty neat. But we'll show the trailer and then I'll introduce our guest.
Hello there, Wappy Dewey. How's that camera? Is that the one Dada bought you? Yeah. Do you love it?
My dad sang a song back then, Sitting on Top of the World. I'm sitting on top of the world, rolling along. We listen to it all the time.
Those of us who have famous parents, we feel like we're a part of this star, you know? That we sacrificed a lot so the public can have it.
I went to high school with Scotti Lewis, the third son of entertainer Jerry Lewis. 35 years later, I got a call. As Urs, I need some help.
When I was convinced that my father did not in fact love me, as he always said he did, I had a nervous breakdown.
My father had to be in control of absolutely everything with no contest.
I see him in one way never stopping to be the director and producer of a set.
Not having a lot of compelling memories about warm and fuzzy times because, very honestly, comparatively, there were not.
He's a man who acts, who directs, who writes, who produces, and beyond that, everything's got to be under his control, everything's got to be right.
Did Jerry Lewis, the director and producer, and some would say the Lord and Master of Paramount Pictures, did he ever turn that off? No.
Mercurial, and that's what he was, very mercurial.
Do you really think a guy like him would have wanted a family?
I have to go now, okay? But I'll be back to see you very soon.
The night that he got his Academy Award, he was in such pain and he had taken so much oxycodone, I think it was, that he was so nasty to his manager, Claudia, that she quit. But he could be brutal. In thinking about his passing, you know, you learn when you go, you're whole again. You don't have back pain or maladies of all kinds. You're whole. And I've been looking at that Hollywood Reporter today with all the features on my dad. They're pictures that look like him being old again.
I'm sitting on top of the world, just rolling along, just rolling along.
Let's have a big sappy welcome for Scotti Lewis. Son
Thank
of
you.
Jerry. Da-da-da-dun.
Dun-dun-dun-dun. I'm very proud of that fact. My dad was not the greatest father in the world, but I'll never be the first person to knock him down because he was a genius as well. And I just can't forget that.
Well, his legacy is amazing.
Thank you.
I don't know if anybody here has a favorite Jerry Lewis movie. Mine's The Bellboy.
Naughty Professor.
Disorderly Order.
Disorderly Orderly, yeah.
And Jerry.
And many other Frank Tashlin pictures, and my father loved Mr. Tashlin because he learned so much from him about directing. My father he was self-taught as a director, so
And he wrote one of the best books on the making of film,
The Total Filmmaker.
Total Filmmaker. Kenny can back me up on that.
A page, chapter, verse, and word.
Yeah. So we're going to jump to Stan Laurel, because besides the green-headed dragon of jealousy, we've talked a little bit about Stan, but you called him Uncle Stan for a very good reason.
He asked me to call him that. He didn't have any kids of his own, right?
No.
Yeah, he didn't have any kids of his own.
Except for his daughter Lois. I don't want to leave her out. Sorry.
But he loved my father, and my father loved him. And my father was not a person that really was friendly with a lot of other big stars. But Stan was so lovable and so friendly, my dad couldn't help but love him. And in the mid-'60s, before Stan passed, my dad was finishing a contract at Paramount that he had for 10 years, from 56 to 66. And he wanted Stan to write for him on some of the movies. And actually Stan turned him down because he thought my dad was offering him charity. And my dad was doing nothing of the sort.
Yeah.
My dad's a fairly selfish performer. He wanted Stan there because he knew he could get quality out of him.
Right.
And he wanted to bring Stan back to the studio. But he was pretty content to be retired and just to be in his residence hotel in Santa Monica, where I live now. He was a great, great guy. He'd call and talk to my parents. And my mom would talk to Stan's wife, Ida. And then they'd put me on, and Stan would talk to me. And he knew that Sons of the Desert was my favorite movie. So, as I told you before, on occasion he said, "Let's sing." And he would go, "Honolulu, baby, where'd you get those eyes?" And I would sing right along with him. And as I told you before, the last joke in Sons of the Desert, Stan starts singing "Honolulu, baby," and then gets hit in the back of the head with a pot from Ollie.
Yeah.
But he was a dear, dear man. He sent me comic books, Laurel and Hardy comic books, but I never met him face to face because he didn't want me to see him looking like an old man, not the young guy with the little thin guy, you know. He didn't want me to see him looking old. So we just talked on the phone.
Yeah, when he accepted his Academy, he didn't accept his Academy Award Lifetime Achievement, but Danny Kaye had accepted it for him. And he told Chuck McCann he didn't want people to see that Stan.
And I guess I can understand because of the type of person he was, but people like all of us here today loved him and just wanted to see him, you know? I mean, when John Wayne walked out on the Academy Awards for his last time, he looked horrible.
Yeah.
But we all wanted to see him, you know? And I sure would have loved to have met Stan in person, because I just loved him, and he knew that I loved him too, so he loved calling me and talking to me. It was just a gift, a blessing, a real blessing from a comedic genius. He wrote all the jokes for his team.
Yeah, he was the creative person behind it. Ollie just wanted to get out on the golf course.
Right. Oh, did he play golf? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he won lots of Hal Roach golf tourneys.
Is that
In all the books, you see all these shots of him holding one of the trophies after every single golf tournament. They would hold up this trophy, and that's what he wanted to do. In fact, Stan would wait till the end of the shooting day to get takes of Ollie looking frustrated, knowing he wanted to get out on the golf course. So those looks of frustration were really looks of frustration.
It was the same with Dean Martin too. He couldn't wait to get to the golf course,
Yeah.
and he got fed up with my father many times.
Yeah, the early Martin and Lewis particularly, we actually showed a Colgate Comedy Hour with them killing time by doing one of their nightclub acts, and they're absolutely brilliant.
Oh, that's
They
some
really,
funny
really are.
stuff.
Yeah.
That's a lot of improv there. I can remember one scene where They're on an upper and lower berth of a train, supposedly, and my dad puts a hole in a water pipe, and water starts coming out, and Dean puts his hand across the water to stop it, and my father looks and says, "Ha! You forgot to take your watch off," and Dean goes, "Oh!" Because that ruined his watch at that point. You know? Yeah, they were great. They loved each other. But at the end, just could not coexist. They were too big on their own, you know. Dean was an amazing comedic actor as well.
Yeah, he's not acknowledged for that a lot, but when you watch the Dean Martin show, man, that comes through. It's amazing.
Also, he hated to rehearse.
Oh, yeah.
And so what you saw on that show night was the first time he was doing the bits. That's why he laughed so much, because he was making mistakes. And
Yeah. Well, Jackie Gleason hated to rehearse as well.
him as well.
Which drove all his co-stars nuts.
Yeah.
But he wanted to keep it fresh. So.
I ran into one of Jackie Gleason's regular cast members. What was it? George Petrie was his name. He did all kinds of characters on The Honeymooners. He was a bus driver, co-worker of Ralph's and whatnot. I saw him on the driving range one day and introduced myself, and he was pleased that I recognized him. And he said, "Your dad came by the Ed Sullivan Theater one night when they were rehearsing to do a Gleason show, and he said those two guys just tore the place apart. Just hijinks and teasing everybody, and everybody there trying to work, you know." But that was both of their MOs, Gleason and Lewis.
Yeah, I was telling Scotty earlier that the Colgate Comedy Hour had a night called, I think it was Battle of the Network Comedians, and they had on one show, this is one show live, Martin and Lewis, Abbott and Costello, the Three Stooges, Jimmy Durante, Eddie Cantor.
Eddie Cantor, yeah.
And these films were sitting in Jerry's warehouse, you know, and being a film enthusiast and collector, that's one warehouse I would like to visit. Not take it, but just visit and watch it. But that's just amazing talent you just don't see anymore, you know.
Yeah.
Good, clean fun, and Abbott Costello, of course, he was on first, Martin and Lewis, whatever. But I liked Jerry's quote that said, basically he and Dean was Dean Martin and his trained monkey. So.
It was the handsome man and the monkey.
Yeah. So quite a legacy. I was looking on Internet Movie Database. I don't know how right that is, but you were one of the production people on Hardly Working.
Yeah.
And Cracking Up, which was first known as Smorgasbord, was
Right. I was
Yeah.
associate producer on that.
Yeah, and there's some incredibly funny moments in Cracking Up.
Funny bits.
Yeah.
Hardly Working too had its moments.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Nothing like his best work, but
Right.
but definitely some small things that made you remember the past.
When he goes to the psychologist, and there's this woman in a doorway with her back to the camera, and she has this amazing voice. "Oh, doctor, I just can't control myself around men. I don't know what to do." And doctor's looking at her like, "Well, you just have to work with this." And Jerry's watching them talk. And then when the woman turns around, it's Milton Berle in drag.
Right. Right.
Really?
It was Ruta Lee's voice, but it was Milton Berle in drag. And the two of them were very contentious when they were on stage together. Berle did not like to be topped by anyone.
Yes. Yeah.
And my father, when he was young, it was possible for him to do anything. So actually, my dad told me one time that when he was up on stage with Berle got very close to him and then grabbed his elbow, like right here. The audience couldn't see. It was on the side where they were together. And he squeezed so hard that my father couldn't think of anything else except the pain that was happening.
Yeah.
And that's how he got my dad to shut up, and he did what he wanted.
I like the way, by the way, Scotty was telling me nonchalantly, "Oh, I was with my dad in a supermarket, and I met Walt Disney."
Oh,
You know, just
Trader Vic's.
What?
Yeah, I got to meet Mr. and Mrs. Walt Disney. He was around a lot of important people, and I was thrilled. We met a lot of big stars.
Who would you say was the nicest? I like asking
The
that.
nicest had to be Tony Curtis. He lived on the same block as we did in Bel Air with his wife Janet Lee, who was a friend of my father's and was in a number of his pictures. And Tony used to come by all the time. My dad would play him things in his stereo room that he had either just edited together or some comedy album that he loved, of Bob Newhart or Myron Cohen.
Yeah.
But Tony was a doll. He remembered me and my brother's names. A lot of times when we got introduced to stars, they would kind of talk to us en masse. Nice meeting you boys, you know,
Yeah.
whatever. But Tony and Sammy Davis Jr., they remembered all of our names, my name and my brother's names, and they were just lovely people.
There's a talent, Sammy Davis Jr.
Oh gosh, he was so wonderful.
Could do
And he
anything.
loved to hang around in the dressing room with us. We could chat with him, and
He had great chemistry with your dad, too.
Oh,
One of those
right.
HBO specials I saw him in.
and they performed together in Las Vegas
Right,
too.
right.
Sammy would come out and do like 25 minutes, then my dad would do 25, and then they would do another 25 together, which was fantastic.
I love when your dad would pick up Sammy and say, "I'd like to thank the
The
NAACP
NAACP.
for this award."
And Sammy would always, he would stiffen up his body and he'd say, "Come on, Jerry."
Yeah, put me down. So, just brilliant. I miss this stuff so much, and we're so fortunate we have recordings of these to revisit.
Yeah.
It's so important.
And-
And I love the Big Mouth, but for some reason that's not available. It must be tied up in.
Oh, is that so?
Yeah, because that was filmed down here at SeaWorld if you've never seen it.
Yes, it was.
And Jerry runs out all over the place. And I love when he goes into a hotel and Colonel Sanders
Colonel Sanders.
is at the counter and he's yelling at the.
He's berating the manager.
Berating the manager and going, "You blockhead," you know. And
He's
it's
banging
really,
his cane on
yeah,
there.
it's incongruous to see Colonel Sanders berating somebody, you know, this nice old Southern gentleman. So.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We loved going to the set, and he did so many fun things. We just had a ball. It wasn't the greatest home life. He
Yeah.
wasn't there that often.
Well, you hear that a lot, you know, that publicly and everything else, it's just all, you know, wine and roses. And then personally, because, I don't know, it seems like some comedians, not all, they just have their own little inner demons they're dealing with too, along with their performing. So,
Well, when Dad was doing his movies at Paramount, he was producing and directing most of them, but he never had to rent a screening room because we had a theater in our living room at home. So very often he'd finish the last shot and would just get in his car and come home in costume and makeup. And so he would have a quick dinner, and then we'd go into the living room and he'd look at his dailies from the day before.
now you said you had two carbon arc 35mm projectors
Yep.
in your home?
Exactly. Well, our house was built by Louis B. Mayer of MGM fame. So it was beautifully decked out. He used it as a screening room as well. And it was great. My dad would sit me down next to him, and he had a clipboard with a light where he made all of his notes about everything he saw up there. And he'd explain to me what he was doing, and I developed a very good knowledge of what a frame was and everything to do with what you see on the screen, focus, color, everything. You know,
I had read
composition.
on his off time, sometimes your dad would direct little 16mm movies
Yes.
of people that just would drop by.
He would do homemade movies that were usually takeoffs on famous movies. He did a takeoff on Sunset Boulevard called Fairfax Avenue, and a few others like that. And when he'd have the premiere at our house in Pacific Palisades at the time in LA, he had Klieg lights in the front, and everybody had to come in tuxedos and formal wear. And we had a camera out there shooting the whole thing.
Was there one called Come Back Little Shishka?
Little Shiksa.
Shiksa, yeah.
And you know what that was a takeoff on.
come back little Sheba.
Of course.
But I'm just wondering if these things will ever see the light of day to the public, or is it like, you know, gives them to UCLA or whatever, and they disappear into the vault?
Yeah, I don't know. He's donated a lot of stuff to the Library of Congress. Like I told you about The Day the Clown Cried, which was a World War II picture where he plays a clown in a death camp, and it was never finished. And there's a great deal of interest about it. I saw the rough cut. I thought it was magnificent.
Yeah.
Just telling you about it before, I went to tears just talking about that last scene because it's so moving. It was one of the most painful things in his life for that to not see the light of day.
Yeah.
It was.
I did see an interview with him, and his answer to the questioner was I just didn't think it was good enough. It was good, but it wasn't good enough, something like that.
You know, that was his way of explaining something that just went wrong, because it was produced by 3 different countries, France and England and one other. And when all of those factions can't agree on stuff is just thrown into limbo.
Yeah.
And that's where that poor picture was thrown. So I feel very sorry for that, because we saw it and it was fabulous. With no music yet, or anything finishing it, like titles or whatever, it would have been terrific. Long before Life is Beautiful ever saw the light of day.
Right. I always felt that was kind of an influence to Life is Beautiful.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
So, you have a personal favorite? I think I asked you before with your dad.
Of his movies?
Yeah.
I'd say Martin and Lewis, probably my favorite is The Caddy, which I gave you a copy
Yes,
of.
I appreciate that.
And his movies, I mean, I don't know how I can choose anything but The Nutty Professor. It's just so wonderful, and it's amazing to me how many books that movie is mentioned in that have to do with the horror genre, because it was so much like Jekyll and Hyde. But the colors were magnificent in that picture. And he just did some of his finest work then. I couldn't have been prouder.
And not to mention Stella Stevens as well.
She was gorgeous, and
She was amazing.
When Paramount finally released those movies on DVD, we all went to Paramount for the event announcing it, and I met Stella that night. It was wonderful.
I met her in the Cinecon, and I told her, I said, Marilyn Monroe had nothing on you. That is so sweet! But she was always one of my favorites. You know, Miss Purdy. You know.
Miss Purdy.
Yeah.
Do you remember the football player that stuffs him into the
Yes,
shell?
yes.
You know who that football player was? Med Flory of Super Sax, the jazz group. And he's still out there blowing the sax today.
Yeah. That was 60 something.
63.
So. Yeah. They really are timeless films. I've seen almost all of them, and I also saw a film we made over in France that we never got here called The Defective Detective.
Oh,
And
that's not one of the good ones.
No. But I was really curious, and again, it had some good moments in it. But I remember your dad was on Johnny Carson. And he said, because of your popularity, in France.
I did not know that.
Yeah, he goes, it's hard for you to get from your hotel to where you're performing, isn't it? And he goes, it's really awful, and it would be even more terrible if I used a limo. Because he said he liked to walk and have people recognize him and greet them. So.
Not really. Because you could be anywhere with him. I remember being in Katz's Deli on the Lower East Side when he was doing Damn Yankees on Broadway. And he was chewing his food. And somebody just come right up on the table and gets right in his face and wants to tell him a joke, you know. And my father would just shoot laser beams out of his eyes. And when I'm with him, or his assistant was with him, you have to be a de facto bodyguard, you know. Hey, come on, buddy, give him a break, he's eating, you know. People would come by the table and actually told dirty jokes in front of women that the person didn't even know. My father's wife and friends.
Is that human beings that are doing that?
They just feel that you know him. He's one of the family or something.
They walk up to him and say, "You're my biggest fan." I heard that dozens of times. They get flustered, and "You're my biggest fan."
Well, I know I joined the SAPS and thanking Scotty for coming. We could talk for another hour, but I know you people want to watch movies. I don't know. But again, a big thank you for Scotty for showing up. It was a pleasure meeting you. I have a new friend, I feel, so that's great. So thank you again, Scott.
I thank you very much for asking me, and everybody that loved Stan and Ollie, I love you all too.
And Scott, in closing, Scott had mentioned that he had a copy of Sons of the Desert and lost it. I made him a new copy.
Thank you so much.
Along with the music box and one of my favorites too.
Oh yeah, music box.
John.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll talk.
When is the documentary coming?
Oh yes, when is the documentary coming out?
The documentary is still being worked on. That 3-minute clip you saw was shown at the Palm Springs Film Festival last month. We were competing for prize money. Unfortunately, we didn't win, but we got a lot of notice, and people are still calling my producers to ask what's going on, what's the next festival we're going to, stuff like that. Like I say, my dad wasn't the greatest father, but I will always love him with all my heart. He was a genius, and me and my family sacrificed a lot so the world could have him. And that was okay for me when I was doing it. It still is.
Again, thank you, and we have a little bonus, Jerry here, in the Bellboy, his writing partner, Bill Richmond, did an imitation of Stan Laurel. It's a very quick clip, and he's really brilliant in it. He captured Stan like nobody's business. And also, some of Jerry's own movie footage has him reading a letter that it looks like it was delivered to the set, because he holds it up and he says, "I just got this from you, Stan," and it's a letter wishing him well on the Bellboy, and that was the production that he wanted Stan to help out some gags with, and just wasn't his cup of tea for whatever reason. So you'll see the Stan Laurel sequence, and then we're going to be going into something called That's That, from 1937. It was not meant to be seen by the public. It's a short that was made for Stan Laurel for his birthday in 1937. And they took various clips and snippets from movies, including some of their foreign language stuff. And it's the only known existing footage of any bloopers. And you get to hear Mae Bush say nuts. And it ends with Edgar Kennedy saying, not really a cuss word, or pretty common, but it's a real interesting little short. And then we're going to end the evening with the Midnight Patrol, one of their best two-reelers, where they play policemen. And you have to watch this film and go, how did they become policemen? What is required in 1933 to be a policeman that let these two guys in? And a little bonus surprise at the end I think you'll enjoy. And we'll see you at our next meeting. And also, I saw it, Brian. I know you're doing it. What did you want me to say again, Brian? Oh yes. If you've heard about this but haven't seen it, there's a Rose Marie documentary called Wait for the Laugh, or Wait for Your Laugh, and it's on tomorrow night at 11 o'clock at night. Why, I don't know, but she was a 4-year-old child prodigy hired by Al Capone, who said, "I'm going to take care of you, kid." You know, one of those things, and she skyrocketed to stardom. It's a fascinating documentary. Our raffle will be held immediately after the films that we're showing. And that's about it. All right, let's get our second half started. We'll have the raffle. That'll end our evening. And I think it's been a pretty darn good evening. Thanks to Scotty.
Stan, we're in Miami, and I'm in receipt of your letter. This is Bill Richmond. Say hello to Stan. Hi, Stan. Bill is doing an impression of you, Stan. Here's the letter. It's, as a matter of fact, it was just sent to me. I should say I just received it, and it's your letter, and I think that the title, The Belle of Fontainebleau, is beautiful, and if we have trouble, Stan, with the other title, we'll use yours. Say goodbye to Stan. So long, Stan.
Locker room. Is Stanley down there? Okay, thank you. Say, Art, have you seen Stanley out there by the pool? All right, thanks a lot. Coffee shop. Have you seen Stanley? Which Stanley? The only Stanley in the world. Is there anything I can do for you, sir?
Cuckoo, so let's take a chance to do a new dance. For I'm cuckoo and you're cuckoo, sing tra la 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 la. All the folks have all gone wild. Oh, what a howdy do! Is it because two funny chaps thought of more something new? Side by side you start to glide. Forget all your troubles, let everything slide. For I'm cuckoo and you're cuckoo, sing tra la 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 la.